At a high-stakes global summit in Geneva, world leaders gathered around glossy tables and polished speeches, all claiming to shape Africa's future. But beneath the warm smiles and well-rehearsed lines, something felt off. One after another, Western officials stood up, presenting deals wrapped in fine language, trade agreements masked as gifts, aid tied tightly with strings. Their voices carried confidence. And something else, quiet condescension. But no one expected what came next. Just as the room was settling into routine, Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso calmly remained seated. No flashy podium, no dramatic gestures, just his presence still, composed. And when he finally spoke, it was only one sentence. One simple, piercing sentence that changed everything. The room fell into stunned silence. So what did he say? And why did it shake the most powerful nations to their core? Stick around, because this moment didn't just make history. The rules. Earlier that day, the U.S. diplomat had kicked things off. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today's summit is about partnership, shared growth, and prosperity. We've crafted a new initiative, $120 billion toward infrastructure, healthcare, and governance programs across sub-Saharan Africa. It sounded generous, on paper, even impressive. But was it really about Africa's growth, or something else entirely? Next, the French delegate stepped forward. With utmost respect and a shared belief that Africa must rise with responsible guidance, of course. A faint smile crossed the Kenyan president's lips. He leaned toward Traoré and whispered, "They always dress the leash in silk." Replied without lifting his eyes, "It's still a leash." And that leash was about to tighten. The British minister took the floor. "We propose a continent-wide smart grid managed by our engineers. Phase 1 includes joint monitoring of data flows. Transparency is key."
But the Senegalese president raised an eyebrow in ownership.
The British official didn't flinch. "The infrastructure will, of course, remain under our security oversight for stability." The Ghanaian president leaned back, voice low, meaning your stability, not ours. Tension simmered beneath the surface. But the summit pushed. "On," the moderator announced. "We'll hear from the African bloc later today. President Traoré, you're scheduled for this afternoon. For now, let's continue with financial mechanisms." Then came the IMF representative. "We're ready to restructure African debt at a discount if nations agree to our reform framework. It includes oversight panels and real-time tracking of government spending." Still seated, Traoré finally spoke quietly, but firmly. "So you offer freedom in exchange for surveillance?" The U.S. diplomat, unfazed, replied, "We believe this empowers governments to make responsible choices." The chairperson shifted in discomfort. "Let's remember, we're here for cooperation, not division." But under the breath of one African leader came a sharp truth. They want receipts for every dollar they lend, but can't account. For the centuries they took, and just when it seemed like business as usual would continue, Traoré stood. No fanfare, no microphone. Just one sentence, calm and devastating. The world paused. Every African president stood, one by one and quiet. Solidarity, they walked out, leaving the richest, most powerful nations of the world speechless. What exactly did Traoré say? And how did one sentence echo louder than decades of diplomacy? That is the story the world still whispers about today. We're putting forward a new green partnership to help Africa cut emissions while still hitting our own industrial goals. It's a win-win, as long as everyone plays their part. But at one corner of the long, polished conference table, the president of Ghana leans forward, unimpressed. "Isn't that the same promise we heard 15 years ago when climate funds were first mentioned?" he says, voice calm but firm. The room falls a little quieter. And then he adds, "Now we're being told to shut down our coal plants, while oil rigs are still running strong in the North Sea." That one comment leaves the room buzzing, but things are only just starting to heat up before the lunch break. The moderator tries to keep things on track. "We'll hear one final proposal from the European Investment Group," he says, gesturing to the suited official beside him. "After that, President Traoré will deliver his statement. The EU representative stands confident. We're offering a $10 billion aid package targeted at governance reforms, judicial streamlining, and a stronger, independent media. Because free media is the foundation of democracy. The president of Uganda chuckles under his breath. Free as long as it says what they want to hear. The atmosphere grows tense, and all eyes now shift to President Traoré, who's remained silent until now. Suddenly, Traoré rises from his seat. The moderator blinks, surprised. But President Traoré, your statement was scheduled for after the break. I won't need a statement, he says softly. He walks slowly to the podium. The room falls into absolute stillness. Translators scramble to adjust their feeds. Cameras zoom in. And for a moment, even the diplomats seem to forget to breathe. He scans the room, letting the silence speak before he does. Then he says, if your aid comes with chains, then you're not our partners. You're our wardens. No one moves. No one speaks. But something shifts and it's irreversible. A beat of silence. Then, without a word, the president of Namibia stands and walks out. The president of Kenya follows. Then Ghana, Nigeria, Algeria, Chad, Cameroon. One by one, every African head of states stands quietly, powerfully, and exits. The cameras keep rolling, capturing the stunned faces of world leaders left behind in the Geneva Conference Center for the first time in decades. Africa has left the conversation, and the world isn't sure how to react. A U.S. diplomat leans toward his mic. The hell what just happened? The French delegate stares blankly. I think. Adela, Africa had just left the building. Inside the vast, now half-empty hall, the silence lingers like a fog. Seats once filled with African leaders are vacant. The Western powers sit still, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. We're trying to re-establish contact, the moderator says, glancing at his phone. No response yet. French delegate pulls at his collar. This is ridiculous, he said one sentence. The British minister shakes his head slowly. And that one sentence unraveled 30 years of carefully built policy? No, says the German representative. You don't get it. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a mirror. Meanwhile, just across the street in a quiet lounge reserved for African leaders, a different kind of energy is in the air. The president of Ghana sets down his tea. We finally did it. The president of Kenya smiles, eyes lit with something. Between pride and disbelief, we walked out. All of us. That's never happened before. And in that moment, something became clear. This wasn't just a political statement. It was a historic shift. The old chairperson leaned back in their seat. The tension thick in the room. No one expected what just happened. They assumed we'd bicker, compete for scraps and favors. They never imagined we'd walk out unified. But we didn't just leave quietly. We flipped the entire table. Nigeria's president nodded slowly. Let them call it dramatic. Let them say it was emotional. Senegal's president added. Let them say whatever they want. We're done performing. For their approval. And just like that, the air shifted. But the real shock that was yet to come? Inside a quiet, glass-paneled room, the chairperson murmured, they're going to panic. Already, the headlines were being twisted. Narrative spun. Uganda's president chuckled. Wait until the markets open. That's when they'll realize we're not begging anymore. Back at the summit, the tension was boiling. An IMF official whispered, if they're really walking out. This could shake every development contract we've ever signed. The French delegate snapped. Cut the aid. Cancel their scholarships. Let them feel the pressure. But the U.S. diplomat remained. Calm, no. Retaliating would only prove their point. We need to play smarter. The moderator leaned in. How? The response was cold and calculated. Divide them. Go after their economic partners. Offer solo deals. Isolate Traoré. But it was already too late. Traoré's speech had gone viral. 6 continents were watching, retweeting, translating. German delegates sat back. He didn't just give a speech. broke something open. This wasn't politics, it was dignity. Once dignity is awakened, it's hard to silence. In a press room lit with flashing cameras, the questions came fast. Why did all 54 African leaders walk out together? What exactly did Traoré say? What's the African Union planning next? Outside, a crowd had gathered, but this time, they weren't angry at their governments. A protester raised a megaphone. Today, Africa didn't ask for change. They became the change. The crowd roared in unison. Stand up, walk out. Stand up, walk out. Inside the AU's private lounge, the leaders regrouped. The cameras are waiting, someone said. Shall we speak? Traoré shook his head. Not yet. Why not? Asked Kenya's president. Because they need to feel the silence. We've lived in it long enough. Ghana's president asked, then when do we speak? Traoré looked around the room. When we speak together, and only on African soil. Nigeria's president smiled. A joint summit. No foreign press, no sponsors, just us. The O chairperson nodded. History won't forget today. But Traoré's gaze was steady. Today isn't a victory. It's a warning shot. And the world was finally starting to hear it. 3 days after the walkout in Geneva, global markets were in freefall. European indices tied to African resources turned blood red. Headlines screamed contradictions. Africa abandons global talks. Traoré triggers diplomatic meltdown. End of aid era. In Washington, alarm bells rang. Top officials scrambled into a high-level emergency meeting. They've announced an Africa-only summit, said the National Security Advisor. No foreign media, no Western observers. They're forming a new economic alliance, added the Secretary of State. We can't afford to lose that influence. The Treasury official chimed in. China's watching. Russia's watching. They're ready to step in. The CIA director leaned forward. And so are we. We'll need eyes inside that summit quietly. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, the city of Ouagadougou was preparing for a moment no one thought possible. No interpreters, no Western hosts, no borrowed speeches, just African leaders, African languages, African futures. Senegal's president entered the hall, voice low. I never thought I'd live to see this. Kenya's president replied, no translators, no scripted welcomes, just truth. Namibia's president looked around, just us, and the weight of what comes next. And there, standing silently, with hands clasped behind his back, was Traoré that morning. His mother had sent him a single line of advice. Be careful. Lions roar, but snakes bite. The O chairperson walked up quietly. Ready, Traoré? Didn't he move? No. But it's time. I'm willing, chairperson. It's enough. As the summit began, there were no grand speeches, no flashy introductions, just sincerity. Each leader was given 5 minutes, and though they spoke in different languages, their message was unified and clear. Enough. Enough of being dependent. Enough of being lectured. Enough of receiving aid with strings attached. Enough of being treated like projects instead of partners. Their words echoed through the hall like a long-awaited declaration of independence. But what came next pulled everyone to the edge of their seats. The president of Ghana stood tall. We must start with what we have. Let's trade with our neighbors before turning to outsiders. Let's invest in African currencies, not the euro or the dollar. Next, the Nigerian president stepped forward. We've been exporting raw minerals for too long. It's time we refine them ourselves and sell them on our own terms. Then, the president of Kenya added, if one of us stumbles, we lift them. That's the Africa they fear. Each voice added a brick to the foundation of a new vision. And when it was President Traoré's turn, silence swept the room. We didn't walk out of Geneva for headlines, Traoré said calmly. We walked out to claim space for our dignity, for our children. The world may laugh, but we're not here to entertain. We're here to unite. A pause, then applause. Not the kind meant for cameras. This was real. You could feel the weight behind every clap, but behind that applause was tension because the stakes were sky-dash high, the Ugandan president warned. They'll come for us, one by one, with deals, loans, weapons. Chad's leader added, They'll offer scholarships for our children, military gear for our armies, grants for our NGOs. Traoré looked around the room. Then we say no together, or not at all. Chairperson nodded slowly. Then let's begin. They weren't just making promises. They were drafting a charter. One that declared a new economic bloc. Sovereign, non-aligned, proudly and unapologetically African. Outside, the world tried to catch a glimpse of what was happening inside those walls. Reporters scrambled, drones hovered, photographers zoomed. From miles away, but nothing leaked. A total media blackout. Why? Because what was happening inside had the power to shift the global balance. In the power centers of Brussels, Paris, and Washington, phones rang non-stop. Officials demanded answers. Corporations issued veiled threats. NGOs released open letters. But none of that reached the summit Traoré had planned for this. As the day's final session neared, so did its toughest question. The South African president stood. What if someone betrays us? What if one of us takes a secret deal, signs a private agreement? The room tensed. Trust was their foundation, betrayal their deepest fear. After a long pause, Traoré replied, "Then we don't punish. We remind, not with shame, but with truth. Unity is our only protection. If one falls, we return for them. No one gets left behind." And then, a line that stuck with every leader in the room. That's what the West never understood. We don't want to rule each other. We want to rise together. The next morning in Ouagadougou, the summit continued without ceremony. No flags, no motorcades, no speeches. Just 54 African leaders in a circular hall, no stage. No hierarchy, just water and one shared microphone. Today was not for talking, was for building. The president of Botswana broke the silence. We need to talk about currency. As long as we borrow in dollars and euros, we'll always be under their thumb. The Ethiopian leader nodded. We need a continental currency backed by our minerals tied to our output. Then Zambia spoke. Let's stop calling it a dream. It's a task, a responsibility. Traoré didn't interrupt. He simply listened, pen in hand. Every idea mattered. Some were bold, some messy, but all were rooted in one thing, dignity. Then, chilling revelation, the president of Liberia spoke softly, "We've been infiltrated." The room froze. "I received intel this morning," he continued. "One of us was offered $2 billion in infrastructure aid. All they had to do was walk out and leak the draft charter." Gasps rippled through the room. The president of Cameroon leaned forward. "Who?" They said no. Liberia replied. "I won't name them. But I share this so we remember this isn't just about creating something new. It's about protecting it. And that requires discipline." A long silence followed. Then Traoré spoke with quiet resolve. "There will be more offers. More traps. What we do here has already begun to change the world." They all knew this wasn't just another meeting. As the room quieted, Traoré stepped into the center, his presence calm but commanding. "We've signed agreements before," he said, looking around. "Treaties, pacts, always with fine print, always with strings." A murmur of agreement moved through the room. But this time, it has to be different. No hidden clauses, no foreign consultants, no lifelines from across the sea. If we recital, be by our own hands. If we fall, same story. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick with meaning. And then, slowly, a wave of applause rippled through the chamber, not loud, but full of weight. It felt like something sacred had just been spoken aloud. But what came next would take this from words to something far deeper. A voice rose from the edge of the room. The president of Morocco stood, eyes thoughtful. "Let's give this covenant symbols something our people will recognize, something they'll feel, not just understand." The president of Mali offered a flag. Morocco shook his head. "No, a tree, a real one. Planted right here. Each of us will water it. Its survival will mirror our own. Its roots, our unity." The idea was so simple it almost sounded poetic. But in that room, surrounded by leaders, hardened by history, it landed like a drumbeat from the past. Could something so small carry the weight of an entire continent's hope? Traoré stepped outside. There, as if the earth itself had been listening, stood a young baobab sapling, already brought, already waiting. No one had asked for it. No one needed to. The elders of Burkina Faso had sent it, knowing what it would mean. One by one, each president walked out. They poured water from their own flasks, pressed hands into the soil. No speeches, just quiet gestures that spoke louder than words. The president of Tanzania stood back and said softly, "It will outlive us, or it won't. Either way, the people will know what we tried to plant." That night, as if the skies were watching too, a storm swept over Ouagadougou. Rain pounded the city but curiously, not the summit grounds. Inside, the final lines of the Charter of Continental Sovereignty were being typed. No IMF oversight, no foreign advisors, just the hands of those who would bear the consequences of its success or failure. "We need signatures by dawn," Secretary announced. "And a message to the world? Shall we send a press release?" asked the president of Mozambique. The president of Algeria shook his head. "No. We'll send a signal." Traoré nodded, something quiet, but impossible to ignore. He picked up the pen first and signed, then passed it. Around the room it went, some leaders firm, others visibly moved. But not a single one hesitated. By midnight, 54 signatures, no holdouts, no vetoes. The president of Rwanda broke the silence. "They'll call this a rebellion." The president of Malawi smiled. "Let them. They've always feared what happens when we speak with one voice." Traoré leaned in. "Tomorrow, we won't explain. We'll show." Silence followed. Then a whisper, "Let every embassy, every stock exchange, every capital wake up to something they've never seen before." And when morning came, it wasn't with chaos. It was with calm. No press conferences, no announcements, just quiet. Halls filled with quiet resolve. By 9 a.m., cameras were in place. News crews from New York to Nairobi, from Beijing to Brasilia. They had been invited but not told what to expect. Traoré stood not on a stage, not behind a flag but among his peers. In front of them, baobab tree, planted, alive, defiant. A single microphone passed to him, and then he spoke. "Good morning." The voice was steady, calm, without theatrics, no threats, no speeches. It's just a clear message from Africa to the world. The man standing at the podium was President Traoré. He scanned the room. For too long, he said, "Our sovereignty has been traded away in silence." But today, that silence was breaking. And just like that, history began to shift. So what exactly happened next? President Assegal took the floor. Effective immediately, he declared, "We're ending support for any foreign military bases on our land that haven't been approved by a unified African Council." No drama, just a decision, firm, direct, and unapologetic. Then came the president of Angola. "We're stepping back from every loan deal made in secrecy," he announced, "especially those enforced in foreign courts. That era is over." The message was simple. Africa was done playing by rules written elsewhere. But the biggest surprise was still to come. Ghana's leader stood tall. "We are launching a joint African currency reserve," he said. "Not by foreign promises, but by our own resources. Our productivity, our trust in each other. No fancy speeches, no justifications, just statements, bold, honest, and deeply overdue." And then Traoré stepped up one final time. Some thought the unity was sudden, but he made it clear this moment was centuries in the making. Suffering shaped us, deception delayed us. But today, we see clearly. He turned to face the world's press, his voice unwavering. "If claiming our sovereignty makes us enemies of those who once called themselves friends, then maybe they were never truly friends." Then came the words that would shake the globe. Traoré calmly folded a document, placed it on the table, and said, "We're done asking." Silence fell, and then without a word, each African head of state stood up. One after the other, they walked out of the chamber, united, not in protest, but in purpose. No one waited for applause, No one looked back, but outside. Even more powerful was happening. A crowd had gathered, not with slogans or banners, but with quiet reverence. Farmers, students, workers, everyday Africans. They weren't protesting, they were witnessing history. And then an elderly woman stepped forward, barefoot, holding a small clay bowl filled with water. She poured it at the base of a young sapling, knelt, and whispered something too soft for microphones to catch. But Traoré heard her. Let it grow. He nodded, and in that small moment, everything changed. By nightfall, the footage had circled the globe, but no one was ready for what it meant. Emergency meetings erupted in capitals around the world. Analysts were stunned. Diplomats scrambled. They didn't walk out on us, one former ambassador admitted. Yeah, they walked toward something we can't control. In Paris, a confused aide asked, "What do we offer now?" No one had an answer. But across Africa, from Cairo to Cape Town, the feeling wasn't one of celebration. It was something deeper, awakening. A new kind of map was forming, not drawn on borders, but etched in the minds of millions. And across it, one word echoed in every language. In every direction, enough. It didn't begin with war or revolt. It began with one sentence. One man, and 54 leaders bold enough to walk beside him. Africa didn't walk out that day, it walked forward, and the world watched, unsure of how to follow.